morning. Welcome to another video of the recipes that I'm doing on what they ate during the Great Depression. If you're new here and you have not seen any of the other videos, please go check those out. I've made a few things that they ate during the Great Depression. As far as reference, I'm using a couple different things. I've got a few different Depression cookbooks downloaded to my phone and my computer, and then I also ordered a couple different books to be able to reference by. So I've done different things out of different books, but there's a lot of really cool and interesting recipes on the internet, and of course, you know, the books that I ordered were off of Amazon. The one I'm using today is Depression Era Cooking, and I got that one off of Amazon. I think it was like $9 or something like that. So today what I'm going to do, it's called Mother's Everyday Bread. Now I was reading over it, and I'm going to cut the recipe in half because this makes 5 to 6 loaves, enough for a week if you're lucky, is what it says. Well, I don't even own 5 to 6 loaf pans, I own 4, so I'm going to cut the recipe in half because just in case we don't like it. I'm sure it'll be fine, but I'll use it for something else, breadcrumbs or something. So, but I am going to be cutting the recipe in half, but I'm going to read to you what the full recipe is, and then also tell you, you know, obviously what I would be doing in half. That way, if you did want to make 5 to 6 loaves and, you know, put them in the freezer or whatever, you would have them. So, for starters, it says 2 cakes of yeast. And I did not get the yeast out. So, I'm not going to lie, I did have to look up what the, what do you call it, conversion is, I guess, for the yeast. Because I buy mine in bulk, so, and I've never used the yeast cakes before, so I'm not familiar with how they measure out. But it says 2 cakes of yeast, so I did look it up, and 1 cake of yeast equals 2 1/4 teaspoon of active yeast, or instant yeast, rapid rise, any of those. I'm using active yeast today because it does not specify if it was active or instant. I'm assuming it was probably active yeast. So since it was 2 cakes, but I'm cutting it in half, I'm only going to be using 2 1/4 teaspoon of the active yeast. And it says dissolve the yeast and the sugar in a 1/2 cup of warm water. So I'm going to get, and actually my water should still be warm because I just did dishes. So actually, since that says 1/2 cup of water, it's going to be 1/4 cup to do it in half. Now normally I would do this in my stand mixer, but I'm going to actually do it without the stand mixer today and see how it turns out, considering this is, even cutting it in half is going to make a lot of bread. I'm really hoping that it's good. Okay, so it's going to be, what did I say, 2 1/4 teaspoon. So there's 1/4. So I'm actually only going to need, yeah, still, because I'm doing half. So there's 1, 2, and 1/4. And the sugar is 1 teaspoon, so I'm actually only going to need 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. says set aside for about 10 minutes. So we're going to leave that, and I'm going to go ahead and get everything else measured out. So we'll just set that right there. And with the yeast, mix together with the yeast the rest of the water. So we used 1/4. It calls for 5 cups of warm water. So that would actually be 2.5. I used 1/4. Yeah, I used 1/4. So I'll need 2 1/4 cup of water. I don't know. We'll see how this goes. This is going to be interesting. So there's 1. 2. It's hard when you're taking some of these older recipes and dividing them in half, because some of them have really interesting measurements. It's not like converted the way we've done it before. And then we're going to need 4 teaspoons of salt, so I only need 2 teaspoons of salt. That seems like a lot of salt, doesn't it? So 2 teaspoons of salt. And then it says 3/4 cup of sugar. So I'm actually going to need, oh gosh, my math is horrible. 1/2 cup of sugar? No, that's wrong. Yeah, no. 3/4, so I need 1/4 cup of sugar. Hello, think of quarters, hello. Well, actually I would need a little more than 1/4. If you have 3/4 and you divide them in half, it's actually going to be 1/3. So I'm just going to do a little bit more. I'm totally winging this, so we will see how it turns out. Okay. Now it does call salt, sugar, and about 6 cups. When do you add the oil? Water, salt, sugar, and the flour. Beat well. Keep adding flour until stiff dough is formed. Knead well for about 10 minutes. Cover, let rise. Punch down. Cover, let rise. Put into a greased pan. Okay, so you don't add the grease to it. Okay. So it calls for 16 cups of flour. Like I said, I'm not going to make 5 to 6 loaves, so I'll just be using 8 cups of flour. And we'll get a dry one here. That's a 1 cup. You know, normally it's like one of those things where you can figure out the math until you're on the spot, and then all of a sudden your brain just kind of goes into retard mode. Two. 3. 4. So I'm going to add 6 of them for now, and then I'll add the other 2 after I get all this mixed up. And scoop my flour out of the way. When I do big projects like this, I keep a 5-gallon bucket down here because my little canister wouldn't be enough. Okay, so let me actually... Alright, so we're going to add the yeast, sugar, and water. Okay, oop, not that one. So there's 7 cups. But it says you add flour until a stiff dough forms. Now I've made bread before, so I'm familiar with like the terms of like, I guess the consistency that they're looking for. There was one recipe I was looking at for, I don't remember which bread it was, and it said to knead it 110 folds. And I thought, wow, I guess they probably did stand there and count all that. Okay, and I'm actually, and yes, I did clean my counters before I started. And the reason I say that, you would be really surprised, some of you, at the comments we get, people that do YouTube channels, on, you know, did you sanitize your counters? Yes, but we're not going to bore you all with watching us wash our countertops. Okay, so I basically did, what, 7 cups of flour, because like I said, I'm cutting it in half. It calls for 16 cups. And I sprinkled the countertop. So we're just going to knead this until, knead well for about 10 minutes, because you want to knead it until a soft dough is formed, and then you'll knead it for about 10 minutes. Cover, let rise, punch down, and let rise again. So it doesn't tell you how long they let theirs rise, but I'm assuming it's probably going to be, you know, the normal that you do for other dough recipes, and it's probably going to be about an hour. That's just kind of the standard or the average. It depends on how warm your kitchen is, on how fast things rise. So, you know, you normally want to just let bread rise until it's doubled in size. So if your kitchen's super warm, that could take as little as, you know, 30 minutes. I've actually had it take longer than an hour, you know, like when my kitchen was like super cold. Alright, I'm going to continue kneading this until we get it to the desired consistency, and then we will be back to show you what we do next. It took about 10 minutes to get it to the soft, dough consistency. It's smooth, it's not sticky. But what's interesting about this recipe, so when I make bread, normally I will grease the bowl, put my dough in there, flip it over, and then cover it and let it rise. They did not do that. They just put it in, covered it, let it rise, and then once it rises, they punch it down, they let it rise again, and then they do, the final steps. So I did not grease this bowl. I'm going to do it exactly how they did it, other than the amounts. And as soon as this has risen once, I'll punch it down and then I'll let it rise again, and then I'll be back to show you what we do next. Well, the way it turned out is the first rise took about an hour, and then I punched it down, and then the second rise I've done for about a half hour. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out. It is a little bit sticky, but not too bad. Now you put it into greased pans. Now, if I would have done the full 16 cups of flour, it says makes 5 to 6. But since I halved it, I guess, I'm going to cut this into 3. So it should make 3 loaves. This is the part where you grease your pans. And I bought a huge thing of oil. Well, I want to make it easier to use in the kitchen, so I put it in one of my old bottles. Now it does give you a measurement for the oil. It actually says a half a cup plus 2 tablespoons of fat. But I've made bread long enough that I pretty much know what it's supposed to do. It's funny because I do have a bread machine that my other half bought me to make bread, to make it, I guess, less time consuming or whatever for me. And honestly, I still prefer to make bread by hand. I never use the bread machine. I don't think it comes out as good with the bread machine. I think if you do it by hand, you can make the loaves like more soft and fluffy and more sandwich style. Okay, so now that I've greased that, I already have the oven preheating to 350, and it says put into greased loaf pans, so I'm just going to kind of shape these into loaves. There's no rolling involved, nothing like that. All right. This will probably be smaller than those two. Now you let it rise for a half hour, and then you bake it in 350 degrees for about 50 minutes. So I'm going to let these rise for a half hour, and I'm going to put them in the oven, and at 350, once they are done, I will come back and show you what they look like, and we'll actually try it. I'm also going to make a sandwich that they made, the type of sandwiches that they ate, so we're going to eat that or try that as well and see how it comes out. So we will be tasting the bread as well as eating one of their sandwiches. So we'll be back soon. The bread is all done, and it is beautiful, and it is soft. These have been sitting for, I pulled them out probably about 10 minutes ago. So let's see what the inside looks like. Yeah, it's done. It's not all gummy or anything. So, now the big question is how does it taste? So first I'm going to taste a little piece of the bread, and then we're going to make a sandwich that they used to eat. That actually tastes a lot like that Amish bread recipe that I did a video on. That is really good. Okay, so let's make a sandwich the way they used to eat sandwiches. Well, one of the sandwiches they would eat. Okay, well, let me grab a plate. So, first you take a tomato. We'll just use the bread knife. And you cut a couple slices. Now I will say I have never had a sandwich like this before. They used mayonnaise. Slices of tomato. And then they would sprinkle a little bit of sugar on their tomatoes. And that is what they would eat for a sandwich. You know, I thought the sugar was going to be a little weird, but that's actually really good. Alright, well there you go. That is Mother's Everyday Bread and their tomato mayonnaise sugar sandwich that they would eat back during the Great Depression. I hope y'all are enjoying these Great Depression videos. I'm actually really enjoying learning new stuff about it and seeing all the different recipes. A lot of them are actually the same things that we eat now. Names have changed a little bit, and some ingredients have changed, but for the most part, you know, like I did the one on chicken pot pie, which to me was more like chicken and dumplings, but not so much of a soup. So, I mean, I will say that everything I have made so far has been very filling. So even if you just make a little bit, like I've made, you know, whatever the recipe says. Some of them I've had to cut in half, but I make the recipe. I serve myself just as I would like any other normal dinner, and I have yet to finish like a plate or a bowl of whatever it was that I made of the meal from the Great Depression. So it is very filling. They did do a lot of breads, a lot of pastas, potatoes, things like that. They didn't do a whole lot of meat, but they did do some. But it has definitely been very interesting. I've truly enjoyed it. Some of the recipes I'm not able to even make because I don't have those ingredients or necessarily access to them. So they did do a lot of stuff with coffee, which that's pretty cool. Some things in there in the recipes I've never even heard of. I'm kind of having to do a little bit of research to see what they are or what they're substituted for. So anyway, well, I hope you guys are enjoying these Great Depression cooking videos. Please leave me any comments if there's something that you would like me to make, or if you know of a recipe that you want me to try. I'm definitely willing to do that. Hit us up on Instagram. We are on there as well. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our videos. We'd greatly appreciate it. Remember, every day is a new beginning. Stay blessed.